June 6, 1944, 9:45 a.m., Colonel General Alfred Jodl stood outside the main hall of the Berghof, raising his hand to knock, only to let it fall again. Two junior officers lingered behind him, their faces tight with anxiety. From behind the thick wooden door came no sound at all. The Führer was still sleeping. Jodl had already been awake for hours. The first alarming reports hit his desk at 5:30 a.m., thousands of paratroopers dropping over Normandy, the roar of naval artillery, landing craft pouring toward the French coastline, Americans, British, Canadians, wave after wave. And yet here he stood, frozen outside a bedroom door, terrified to knock. Every officer at the Berghof knew the rule. Hitler was never to be woken early, not under any circumstance. His sleeping medication was strong. He often didn't rise until 10 or even 11. Anyone who disrupted that schedule risked an eruption of fury that could end a career, or a life Jodl had seen officers exiled to the Eastern Front for far less. Some had simply vanished, but today was different. This was the invasion. Finally, Jodl tapped on the door, softly at first, then louder. Nothing. He tried again. Mein Führer, urgent news from France. Silence Hitler's personal physician, Dr. Morel, had given him his usual cocktail of barbiturates the night before, a dose so powerful that even artillery barrages rarely woke him. Jodl knocked harder. Minutes crawled by before he finally heard movement inside. A faint shuffle, a curse. Then the door cracked open. Hitler appeared in his nightshirt, hair disheveled, eyes puffy and unfocused. At 54, he looked older, skin yellowish, posture sagging with exhaustion and irritation. This had better be important, he snapped. Mein Führer, Jodl said. The invasion has begun. Normandy, multiple landings, airborne units, naval fire. Troops are already on the beaches. Hitler stared at him. 3, maybe 4 seconds of absolute stillness. And then something unexpected happened. His face shifted, not toward panic, but toward a cold, analytical satisfaction. So, he murmured, they've finally made their move. They've revealed their hand. He turned back into the room. Jodl followed. Hitler stepped to the window, gazing out over the Bavarian Alps, bathed in calm morning light. Behind him, the war raged, 700 miles away. Normandy, he muttered. No, not Calais. Interesting. Jodl kept silent. Interrupting Hitler while he was forming a theory was dangerous. Outside, birds chirped. A dog barked somewhere down the mountain. The greatest amphibious invasion in history was underway, but the Alps looked timeless and peaceful. It's a feint, Hitler finally declared. Obviously, they want us to rush our reserves to Normandy. Then they'll strike the real blow at Calais, the logical invasion point short crossing, direct route into Germany. Eisenhower thinks he can trick us. Jodl held the reports in his hands, and everything contradicted the idea of a feint. The scale was too massive, too real, but Hitler was already dressing, already calling for his aides. Bring me every new report, immediately, and get Keitel. We will evaluate before committing anything. That word, commit, chilled Jodl. 2 panzer divisions positioned within striking distance of the beaches, the 12th SS Hitlerjugend near Lisieux, the Panzer Lehr near Le Mans, ready to counterattack, ready to throw the Allies into the sea, but only Hitler could release them. And Hitler, now in full uniform, was almost cheerful. This could be our moment, Jodl. If Normandy is the real effort, we can smash them there, drive them back into the Channel, prove that Fortress Europe is unbreakable. 10:30 a.m. The morning briefing. Fresh updates arrived. Worse than before. The invasion was not slowing. It was growing. 5 main landing zones confirmed. Utah Beach. American forces pushing inland Omaha Beach. Brutal German fire, but U.S. troops still advancing. Gold, Juno, Sword Beaches. British and Canadian units breaking through defenses. Paratroopers controlled vital bridges and crossroads. Naval guns were obliterating coastal fortifications. Hitler stood over the map, listening, asking occasional clipped questions. How many ships? Hundreds. Possibly more than 1,000. Aircraft? The skies are full of them, mein Führer. Troops ashore? Over 50,000 by mid-morning, climbing rapidly. And every time, Hitler circled back to the same belief. Calais. They're saving their main force for Calais. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, calling from his headquarters outside Paris, was blunt. Mein Führer, I request immediate authority to move the panzer reserves. Every hour we wait strengthens their foothold. Hitler didn't hesitate. No, we wait. If we send the panzers to Normandy and the real invasion lands at Calais, we will have nothing left. Mein Führer, with respect, I know the scale, Rundstedt, and I know British deception. Dummy tanks before Alamein, fake radio networks. They are masters of trickery. I will not be deceived. The line went silent. In Paris, Rundstedt lowered the phone and muttered, "He's going to give them the time they need." But he was wrong about one thing. Hitler wasn't hesitating out of fear. He was hesitating out of confidence, convinced he was playing a deeper strategic game, seeing what others could not. Early afternoon, the numbers were undeniable. More than 100,000 Allied troops were now ashore, and climbing the invasion was no feint, no diversion, no trick. But Hitler still refused to budge. German commanders across Normandy were desperate, their voices cracking over the radio as they pleaded for reinforcements. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armored formation close enough to counterattack without Hitler's explicit permission, had already pushed towards Sword Beach, only to be hammered by British anti-tank guns and relentless naval firepower. The division commander sent a stark report. Unless heavy reinforcements arrived, the Allies' beachhead could not be wiped out. When Hitler finally answered, his response revealed everything about his mindset. Tell them to hold their lines, contain the landing area, don't allow it to widen, but we are not releasing the reserve panzers. Not yet. Jodl tried again, his voice strained. Mein Führer, if this is the primary landing, it is not. Hitler snapped. Jodl, think. Look at the map. He jabbed a finger at the wall chart. Calais is only 120 miles from London. Normandy is over 200. Calais is 150 miles from the Ruhr, our industrial core. Normandy is nearly 300. Calais has large ports. Normandy's harbors are too small, too exposed, or too fortified. From a strategic point of view, Normandy is absurd as a main invasion site. Therefore, it isn't. The logic sounded flawless. The logic was also completely wrong. But Hitler's belief in his own strategic brilliance was unshakable. He saw himself as the visionary who had outwitted his generals before. In 1940, they told him the France plan was reckless. He conquered it in 6 weeks. In 1941, they begged him not to invade the USSR. He nearly reached Moscow. These earlier successes cemented his certainty that his instincts outweighed conventional military doctrine. So the panzers stayed immobile, and the Allies kept pouring in. And the beachhead grew. By evening, more than 120,000 Allied troops were on French soil. The landing zones had begun linking together. Some units had advanced 2, 3, even 5 miles inland. They had seized the small port at Courseulles. They had captured Bayeux. This was no longer a tenuous hold. It was a solid foothold, and it was expanding. That evening, Hitler at dinner. Hitler ate in the Berghof's dining room, surrounded by staff and several pre-invited guests. The mood felt strangely ordinary. Someone commented on an opera performance. Another discussed aircraft production numbers. Hitler spoke casually about his grand architectural dreams for post-war Berlin. Wide avenues, massive monuments, heroic buildings. He seemed almost cheerful. Only once did he reference the invasion. "They've made their move," he said, slicing into his vegetarian meal. "We'll see how the situation unfolds. I expect that within a week we'll hear about the real landing. Then everyone will understand why I kept our reserves in place." Across the table sat an aide fresh from the communications office. He remained silent, a folded message in his pocket. The latest casualty-free figure, 140,000 Allied troops ashore. By midnight, that number would surpass 150,000. He said nothing. No one said anything. Dinner continued. Nightfall in Normandy. By nightfall, the Allied beachhead stretched roughly 10 miles wide and 3 to 5 miles deep. A total of 156,000 troops, the exact number later recorded in history, were now on the European continent. They had brought tanks, artillery, supply trucks, ambulances, field hospitals, ammunition dumps, command posts. German fortifications had fallen by the dozens. Thousands of German soldiers had been captured. And the reserve panzers, the only force capable of smashing the Allies while they were still disorganized, remained perfectly still, waiting for permission that never arrived. Hitler went to bed believing he was correct. He was convinced Normandy was a diversion. He was convinced the true invasion was still coming. June 7th and day 2. June 7th brought more of the same. The beachhead widened, more troops landed, supplies streamed ashore in endless convoys. Allied forces captured villages, secured crossroads, and established new defensive lines. Hitler still withheld the panzers. 2 days later, not until June 8th, a full 2 days after the landings, did Hitler authorize even a partial movement of the reserves, and he didn't change his belief about Calais. He simply couldn't ignore the worsening situation in Normandy. He released some units, but not all. He kept large armored forces near Calais, waiting for a phantom invasion that would never materialize. By then, it was far too late. Allied air power dominated the skies. German vehicles attempting to move in daylight were torn apart by fighter bombers. The panzers that did move toward Normandy crawled forward only at night and hid during the day. They lost men and tanks along every road. By the time they reached the front lines, they arrived in small, scattered groups, far too weak to mount the massive counterattack that might have thrown the Allies back into the sea. Rommel returns Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, in charge of Army Group B, had not been at his headquarters on June 6th. He had been in Germany visiting his wife for her birthday, certain the weather was too poor for an invasion. When he received the news, he drove through the night back to France. He arrived on June 7th to find disaster unfolding. Rommel had spent months preparing for this moment, building beach obstacles, mining approaches, positioning forces strategically. But his entire plan hinged on the ability to unleash the panzer reserves immediately. Hitler's refusal shattered Rommel's entire defensive strategy June 9th. Rommel's message. On June 9th, Rommel sent a carefully worded, deeply urgent message to Hitler's headquarters. Respectful in tone, blunt in substance, the situation in Normandy was collapsing. The Allies were strengthening their position with every hour. Without full commitment of the reserve panzers, the beachhead could not be destroyed. Each passing day made the Allies stronger. Hitler replied the same day, "Hold what you have, contain the enemy. The reserves will be used when the situation becomes clearer." Rommel read the message twice, then turned to his chief of staff. "He still believes Calais is coming. He will wait until it's too late." Rommel was right. Hitler's conviction that Normandy was a deception operation lasted for weeks, even as Allied forces poured additional divisions into France, even as they broke out of the beachhead, even as they began driving toward Paris. Hitler kept substantial forces parked near Calais, guarding against an invasion that existed only in his imagination. Operation Fortitude, the Allied deception plan that invented an entire fake army in southeastern England, worked far beyond what its creators imagined. The illusion was so convincing that Hitler continued to believe the phantom invasion was coming through Calais. Long after the facts proved otherwise, June 17, 1944, Hitler agreed to meet Field Marshals Rommel and von Rundstedt inside a bunker complex near Margaville in northern France. It was his first time setting foot in France since 1940. He traveled by car, refusing to fly due to overwhelming Allied air dominance. The atmosphere in the room was tense from the first minute. Rommel laid out the harsh truth. The Allies had already landed over 500,000 troops. The beachhead stretched 60 miles wide and 10 to 15 miles deep. Supplies were coming ashore faster than the Germans could destroy them. Wehrmacht units were being battered day and night by Allied artillery, naval gunfire, and relentless air attacks. The situation, Rommel warned, was critical. Hitler listened quietly, and then answered in a way that showed how far he drifted from reality. "The answer is obvious," he said. "We hold every inch of ground, no pullbacks, no repositioning. Every position becomes a fortress." Von Rundstedt, the elder Prussian, couldn't stay silent. "Mein Führer, if we cannot maneuver, the army in France will be destroyed. We must fall back to defensible positions." Hitler's face reddened. "Fall back? To where? To Germany?" he snapped. "You want to hand over France without a fight? Losing ground is weakness. Weakness invites defeat. We hold every meter. That is an order." Rommel tried a different angle. "Perhaps a political alternative exists, mein Führer. Speak with the British and Americans. Seek terms, some sort of separate settlement. Then direct our strength against the Soviets." Hitler erupted. "A political solution? With Churchill? With Roosevelt? They want unconditional surrender. They want Germany broken. There is no negotiation, only victory or death." The meeting spiraled downward from there. Hitler accused the generals of fatalism, of lacking faith, of misunderstanding the larger vision. He brought up 1940 again, how the world had doubted him then, yet he had been right. He spoke of new miracle weapons, the V-1 flying bombs, the coming V-2 rockets, the jet fighters that would supposedly sweep Allied planes from the skies. Rommel and von Rundstedt left knowing nothing had changed. Hitler would not authorize retreats. He would not shift strategies. He believed sheer willpower could overcome Allied superiority. Meanwhile, in Normandy, the battleground on mercilessly German units fought with skill and courage, but they were drowning in numbers. For every German tank, the Allies fielded 5. For every Luftwaffe aircraft, the Allies deployed 20. For every German shell, the Allies fired 50. The math of attrition was unavoidable, yet Hitler clung to the same mantras. This is a test of will. Germany has endured worse. The enemy will break first. Then came July 20th, 1944, the failed assassination attempt at the Wolf's Lair. The bomb exploded, but Hitler survived with minor injuries. His reaction revealed everything about his worldview. The failures on the battlefield were not due to his decisions, he insisted, but to treason, cowardice, and sabotage within the officer corps. What followed was a ruthless purge. Thousands were executed or imprisoned, many entirely innocent. Hitler's paranoia, already overwhelming, became absolute. He trusted no one, doubted everything, and blamed everyone but himself. Back in France, the front collapsed. July 25th, Operation Cobra. American forces blasted open a gap in German lines. Armored divisions surged forward. The German defense unraveled. Paris fell before the end of August. By early September, Allied armies were approaching the German frontier. Hitler explained all of this in one word: betrayal. Never his own orders, never his refusal to allow tactical withdrawals, never his fixation on defending hopeless positions, never his catastrophic decision on June 6th to withhold the panzer reserves because he was convinced Normandy was a decoy. Historians would later ask the what-ifs. What if the panzers had moved immediately? What if Rommel had been allowed to shift armor closer to the beaches? What if Hitler had recognized Normandy as the true invasion point? Most scholars agree. Even perfect German choices wouldn't have stopped D-Day. The Allies were simply too strong, too much material, too much air power, too much planning. But the cost would have been higher. The beachhead might have been smaller, the breakout slower. Hitler's decisions didn't determine success, but they absolutely shaped the speed and scale of Allied victory. Hitler never understood any of this. In his mind, even to his final hours in the Berlin bunker, the failure was never his. The fault was always someone else's: the generals, the officers, the nation. When he was awakened on June 6, 1944, and told the invasion had begun, his first response wasn't panic, it was satisfaction. He believed he had outmaneuvered the Allies. He believed Normandy was the distraction and Calais the real threat. He believed he was setting the perfect trap. He was wrong on every count. By the time he realized it, if he ever truly did, the war's outcome was already sealed. 156,000 Allied troops were ashore on D-Day. More were arriving every hour. The liberation of Europe was underway. Hitler, the man who claimed to defy conventional strategy, the man who trusted his genius intuition, the man who believed certainty was a substitute for reality, made the worst possible decision at the most critical possible moment. That was the most frightening truth about him. Not that he made mistakes, everyone does, but that he made catastrophic world-shaping mistakes with complete, unshakable confidence. On June 6, 1944, he was given a choice: face reality or cling to illusion. Listen to evidence or obey intuition. Respond to what was happening or react to what he insisted must be happening. He chose wrong, and by the time he understood the consequences, if he ever did, the game was already over.